If I hit a rock, nothing happens because, well, you can't exactly kill a rock with a net. But if I hit a shark, you can see that I lose a net. And the same goes for an octopus. And now that I don't have any nets available, when I hit another enemy, I lose. Perfect! Hi, I'm Ricky. Today we're on the 21st episode of the Endless Random series, and in this episode we'll take a look on how to implement a new item to our game. I'm talking about nets. With this type of item, whenever we collide with an enemy that is an animal, instead of losing a life, we'll just lose a net. We'll start by making the new item, then we had the logic behind it, and finally we had a visual feedback to show how many nets we have available. This series is based on a video game that I've already made and published called BoatVenture. If you want to know how this finished product will look like, do check it out, link in the description. It's free for all Android devices 9+ on the Play Store. Alright, so let's start. First thing I'm gonna do is import the new sprite, and here it is. You can download it and use it for free, link in the description. To make the new item, let's go in the shop panel. In here, grab an item that isn't already used. In my case, I have to go to the second page. Let's go in the shop item script and let's replace one of the dummy items, or let's add a new one. Great, back to Unity. In here I'm just going to change the image, the name and the item type. And I'm also keeping the page 2 open just for testing. Now let's grab our boat player and let's make and add a new script, and I'm going to call it nets. In here we want to know how many nets we have and try and remove one when we want to avoid losing a life. So let's make a new int value for the nets. I've also serialized the field, but you really don't need to. It's just for testing and debugging. You shouldn't mess with it in the inspector. Because to set the nets available, we're going to use a specific function. So let's make a new public void function called start script. In here we just set the number of nets available to be equal to the player path of the item that we just made. Great, now let's make a new public function, and it's going to be of type boolean, and I'm going to call it try remove a net. In here we just check whether the nets available are major than 0, and if they are, we remove one and we return true, else we return false. We also need to call these functions from elsewhere, so let's also make a singleton of this script. Alright, now let's go grab our start game manager, because if you remember, we use the start game manager to call all the start script function in our game before we actually play. So in here, it's really simple, we just call the next that we just made and call the start script function. We do this so we can still increase the number of nets that we have in the shop, and only when we decide to actually play the game that we set the number of nets in our script. Alright, and this goes for the item. Now let's also add the logic. So let's go grab our boat collision script. Within this script, we handle everything that has to do with collision with our player. So basically interacting with enemies and with treasure. I'm just gonna hide the stuff that we don't need. What we want to look at is the Ontriggerenter 2D function. In here, in the else statement, so when we interact with an enemy, we want to check whether the enemy is an animal, and if it is, we try remove a net. And if it's so, instead of losing a life, so instead of calling the onItEnemy function, we destroy the enemy. Before we do any of that, let's make things a bit more clear. At the start of the function, when we know that we've hit an entity, let's grab the entity type script of the entity that we just hit. Then we can replace this with this to make things easier on the eye. And then in here, we want to check whether the entity is an animal. Right now, we don't have a way to do that. We can check each entity individually to see if it's an octopus or a tentacle or a shark, but that's not very efficient. Instead, let's grab the entity type script, and in here let's add a new boolean value called isAnimal. And because we want to change the value in the inspector, but also read it without being able to change it from other scripts, let's also add a get property. Great, now let's go to Unity, and in here let's go in the prefabs, and let's change each entity to reflect whether it's an animal or not. So we say that the orca is an animal, and the octopus is also an animal, and if you look into the tentacles, we want to say that the tentacles too are animals. Great. Now back to the script. Now we have a way to tell whether we have interacted with an animal. So we say if entity type collided with is animal, and we want to try and remove a net from our script. So we call the net's instance, and we call the try remove net. So if both those conditions are true, then we can destroy the enemy. So we just say destroy collision.gameObject. Else, we call the onHit enemy. Now you may be thinking, hold on a minute, we're trying to remove a net, but what if the enemy is not an animal and we try to remove a net anyway? The thing is that with if statement, as soon as one condition is false and we have an AND operator, the second part of the line isn't called. So if you interact with something that isn't an animal, the net instance try remove a net function won't ever be called. If you want to make it clearer, we can also do it like this. This shows a bit more clear what's going on. So we check if it's an animal. If it's not an animal, we hit it. If it is an animal, we try to remove a net. If we can, then we kill the animal. If we can't, remove a net when we hit an enemy again. Do note that this is the exact same as what we've done before. But another thing that we have to check, what if the entity that we collide with is a tentacle? Because tentacles, unlike any other entity, are child game objects. So if we try to destroy a tentacle, we're just going to destroy that game object, but we're not going to destroy the actual octopus. The right way to fix this problem is make a separate function for each entity type that tells us how to destroy that game object. So instead of actually destroying directly the game object, we just call that entity type's function that then destroys that game object the way it's intended to. We'll have to make this function anyway in another episode, so for now let's just use a workaround. Before destroying the actual game object, let's just check if the entity that we collide with is a tentacle, and if it is, then we destroy the parent. Alright, I'm also going to add a comment in here to remind me that we have to fix this problem later on. Great! Now let's go in Unity and let's see if it works. As you can see now I have 0 nets available. I'm just gonna buy 2 of them, hit play. You can see that they update in here. If I hit a rock, I lose. But if I continue and if I hit an octopus, oh, too long. If I hit a shark there, you can see that I've destroyed the shark. And if I hit a tentacle, you can see that the entire octopus is destroyed. And now that I have 0 nets available, by hitting the orca you can see that I've died because I don't have any nets available. So it works, so perfect. Now let's add the visual feedback to tell us how many nets we have. So let's close the player and let's grab the game panel. So I'm just gonna hide the shop panel for a moment. In here I'm gonna add an image and a text in the down left corner. Alright, so that's it. I've used the same sprite for the image of a nets, while for the text, we're going to use Roman numbers to tell how many nets available we have. Also remember to set the pivot to the down left corner, and we're good to go. Now let's go in our net script. In here let's add a reference to the image as a game object, and a text as a UGUI text script. Great, now let's make a new private void function called updateNetsUI. And in here we want to disable or enable the net image based on whether we have any nets available. And then we want to change the text of the nets available text to tell us how many nets we have. And if it's 0, we make it disappear. So for the image we can just say netImage go.setActive, while for the value we can just say whether nets available is major than 0. Nets available major than 0 converts to a boolean statement, so instead of making a new boolean and setting it to whether nets available is measured in 0, and then using that value in here, we can just use this declaration immediately. It's a nice way to save a line of code and to look more professional. Alright, for the text, let's make a new string. And let's make a switch statement based on the number of nets available. In here we can say that for case 1, the new text for nets available text is equal to I, for case 2 is equal to II, and so on. There isn't a function in C# to convert from Arabic numbers to Roman numbers, so we have to do it ourselves. But since we probably won't have to have like 20 nets available, it's not a problem to convert manually. In my case, I'm going to set the maximum number to 3, and if it's anything major than that, I'm just going to debug a log warning. And I just put up major than 3. Because we use the default statement, we also have to say the case 0 is equal to empty. And finally, we set the nets available text to be equal to this string. Great, now we want to call this function, the updateNetsUI, when we start the script and when we successfully remove a net. Let's go to Unity, select the player and drag the references. And by default, let's set the net image to false and the nets available text to be empty. I'm also going to bring up the shot panel again and let's see how it looks. As you can see, by default I have nothing set up, but because I have 2 nets bought, when I hit play, you can see that the UI shows up how many nets available I have. If I hit a rock, nothing happens because, well, you can't exactly kill a rock with a net. But if I hit a shark, you can see that I lose a net. And the same goes for an octopus. And now that I don't have any nets available, when I hit another enemy, I lose. Perfect! Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope you've learned something new. If you have any doubts about the code or any suggestions about the next topic that you'd like me to see, do tell me in the comments. If you like this content and you want more, please like and subscribe and share this video. In the next episode, we make an options and info menu. So we'll have a way to change between menus in our shop, to switch between items, between info, and between options. In the options menu, we'll be able to change the language and toggle the audio, while the info menu is more for us developer to check the current version of the game and to also put our name out there. Alright, so I'll see you in the next video.